That's what I want to do with players. He said, I like to get alongside players. He said, I deal in damaged goods. I said, well, we don't talk about damaged goods really. He said, but I try and bring them back into having a playing career. People are at the end of the career or people who've had a difficult time in their playing career. And I said, well, we call that salvation, Sam, you see, in our world.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Onside, where faith meets football, brought to you by Good News Broadcasting. I'm Eamon, and with me, I'm joined by my co-host and friend, Warner. On this episode, we have Phil Mason joining us. So he's the Bolton Wanderers Chief Operations Officer. He's also the club chaplain, and he's also CEO of Bolton Wanderers in the community. And he's here to talk more about how faith plays a part in what he does in the many different roles that he has at Bolton Wanderers. So thank you very much for joining us, Phil. How are you?
I'm great, thanks, Eamon. Great to see you and great to be with you. Thank you.
So we'll start how we always start with the two questions we've asked every single guest who's come on this. What football team do you support?
So clearly, I support Bolton Wanderers Football Club. I've been in the club for 20 years now, working from being a volunteer chaplain right through to all the roles that you've just described, including, actually being paid for in terms of the chaplaincy role, which is fantastic as a club to make that kind of statement. So I've always had a passion for Bolton Wanderers since those days. Prior to that, believe it or not, when I went for an interview for the job as chaplain, I'd never been to a football game at all.
Really?
So, yeah, no. I come from Preston, so maybe that's what it is.
Yeah.
But actually, the reason I got asked to be interviewed was because I'd done some chaplaincy for the Commonwealth Games when it came to Greater Manchester.
Interesting.
Why they'd asked me to come for an interview, but I made it very clear from the very start, I'm sorry, it's great of you to invite me. I understand that, but I'm the wrong person. Anyway, 20 years later, I'm doing all this.
No, that's an incredible start. And so what is your then best footballing memory?
Oh, wow. Best football in memory. That's really difficult. There's been occasions when Bolton Wanderers have, been in playoff moments or they have managed to stay up and survive from Premiership or into the Championship or whatever it might be. But I guess my favourite resounding new moment would have to be winning the Papa John's Cup. And I know it's a cup and all that kind of thing, but it was such a significant and iconic moment for us last year at Wembley to be back at Wembley and doing that after all the clubs through, because we, don't forget, it was only 4 or 5 years ago, we were nearly in no existence whatsoever. And now to have that kind of resurrection and new start and new beginning, it just summed it up on that glorious sunny day when we won 4-0.
My earliest memory of Bolton, I must say, is watching JJ Okocha play.
Yeah. He was
legendary.
Yeah.
The streets won't forget. He's up there as one of those players that world-class baller. I loved watching him play.
JJ can still do that. When we've had legend games here back at the stadium, he just comes on and performs. Incredible. It's like the years have never passed him by, And my lasting memory, apart from what he did on the pitch with JJ, was the fact that, because he was a real man of faith, and I started a little prayer group for, footballers, which we've had every year since, and the team. He joined straight away, and he stood in the changing room and assumed that we would just have a big open prayer meeting for everybody in the changing room. And I said, no, we're doing a little group, somewhere else. Good. Well, why don't we just do it here now?
So, Phil, when we spoke with Peter Lupson on football history, he mentioned that Bolton Wanderers is one of the clubs that can trace its roots all the way back to some really strong Christian influences during its founding and things like that. So does that still hold a trace in modern day? As you've said, you're the chaplain. So how does faith play a role in the life of Bolton Wanderers at the moment?
Yeah, it's massive. The Reverend Joseph Farrell Wright was the founder of Bolton Wanderers Football Club, and he found it along with a guy who was looking after a school, and the two of them got together, and they used the power of football to actually transform kids' lives, really, and get them back into education. And they did a phenomenal job of this particular school, Christchurch, in the centre of Bolton. And so they used the power of the sport to do all that and create discipline in the lads' lives and everything. And that school really transformed. And of course, that was where Christchurch FC was formed. And then 3 years later, they lost their pitch. So every time they played a home game, they had to go and find a pitch. So they wandered around and got known as the Wanderers. And that's where it all started. Now, when I look at our charity arm, Bolton Wanderers in the Community, that's exactly what we do. We use the power of sport to make a transformational difference in community. And although, not all my 54 staff in that department are Christian, I would say they are of kingdom value, and they do have a passion for doing good and doing right. We've got new ownership now, and they have totally embraced Chaplain said they've totally embraced what we do, who we are, and what we're about. And Sharon, our owner, will talk constantly about being on the spiritual journey together, on God providing. We've got Ian Everett, who's a manager, who's a man of faith. He goes to a church every week, and he also, gathers together people for prayer before the games, etc. And we do lots and lots of things in the club that establish it, for me, as a cathedral within the centre, within Bolton, as a central point for people who are exploring faith or who've got faith to be able to express their faith.
That's really encouraging to hear that, actually, and seeing how faith kind of still plays a part. Because from speaking to Peter, he was saying that some clubs didn't even realize that their roots could be traced back to kind of Christianity or churches or anything like that. And so it's good to know that you have that knowledge that you did start in that way, but then that's still being played out and lived out kind of even 100 years later or whatever it's kind of been. As you mentioned there, and as Peter has said in his episode, talks about kind of historically that Reverend kind of used football as kind of a means of engaging the community, engaging younger people and different things like that. And we spoke to Christians in Sport. We did an episode with them and kind of learn more about the amazing work that they're doing and using football and using sport as a means of reaching people and engaging with Christians as well as kind of non-Christians. And so you mentioned there how you yourselves are doing that as well. So how does that look like to you in this day and age? How can football be used as a means to kind of reach the lost and kind of engage the community and help the community?
Yeah, in so many ways. I mean, through Bolton Wanderers in the Community, we run 33 programs out in the community, and it's all about looking after people's mental health and well-being, their physical health, looking after those that have lost their way and need a new direction. And we talk about the Emmaus Road experience all the time, about actually being alongside these people and journeying with them and supporting them and encouraging them and getting them to be the best people that they can be, which of course is exactly gospel message. But we also do things that are more faith specific too. So we always have a carol service every year in the ground. We don't go to church, we have it in the ground, and we're very specific about that because we want people to feel comfortable in a place that they already love to come to be able to express or explore something about the Christian story. This year we had 1,200 at the carol service. Last year we did for the first time a carol service actually in the stadium, and over 10,000 people come to that carol service, and we raise money for charity as well. So we're going to do what we call a small one and a big one every year, but actually the small one's quite big, 1,200 plus, so it's great. The other thing is that we now do a series throughout the season called Family Faith Football. And so that's a pre-match experience. So, obviously there's loads of hospitality that people can buy. And part of that pre-match experience is to listen to former players. It's to have interviews. It's to talk about the game that's coming ahead, and it's to have good food. So we do that, but we offer it to churches to say to churches, you identify people who may be just on the fringe, on the margins, not quite certain, not sure of what direction and at this stage wouldn't feel comfortable coming into a church setting. So we invite them along and we do this family faith football, which I can only describe as messy church in a football stadium. And there's something for the kids. We bring Lofty the Lion in, our mascot. We do a build up to the game, but we always have a theme that kind of relates to football. And we interview former players in there, particularly those that have had a particular story or a particular journey, be it of faith or spirituality of any kind, that fits with our theme. And then we take it from there. So just to give you an example, we talked about the very fact that everybody has a shirt number and they have the name on the back. So we do a bit quiz around that and everything like that. And then we talk about how it's important that players are not known just as a number, they're known as a person, and that God knows as a person, not a number, and that even the hairs on our head are counted, which isn't too many for me. So God must remember me quite frequently, and all those kind of things. So it begins to explore those avenues of faith. And then there's a call to action at the end of what people can do to either explore their faith more or to do something good and something positive. And then people go to the game and we give them a ticket to the game at a very cheap price. So that is a great thing that we do. And our chairman's been to that, our chief exec's been to that, former players have been to it. In fact, current players have been to it. If they're injured, they come along and do a bit of a chat as well.
I feel like that's such a strong demonstration of what the ethic of Bolton has been, because I think, especially from the outside looking in as fans, we don't, of course, know all this information. And sometimes, especially as a Christian, you kind of get this thing sometimes where it's like, oh, don't worry, it's only football. Like, don't take it too serious. Or sometimes there is a discussion of how much can you be passionate about football and be a Christian. But what I love is that you guys are using your realm of football to be really intentional about not just bringing the gospel to people in that sense, but I think also just having a care and awareness for your community of saying, actually, we want to help you and we want to provide things for you that you'll enjoy. Because I could imagine being a family and getting to go to your local team for Messy Church would be an incredible experience, I think. So that sounds amazing. So you did mention that you're club chaplain at the moment. I think it was before we started recording, you mentioned that you first became volunteer chaplain. So could you just tell us a bit about your journey? Was that something that you had thought about or surprised you? And then could you just break down a little bit of what does a chaplain do in a football team?
Yeah, certainly. So yeah, big surprise one. Not a Scooby that I'd end up as a football chaplain. So just to give you a bit of background, I'd never been to a football game in my life before until 20 years ago when I started my 20th anniversary this year in the club. So I'd never been to a football game in my life. All my family who were football fans of various kinds always mocked me. And when my wife and I got married at 3:00 on a Saturday, even my best man said, well, it's typical, isn't it? Because he knows nothing about football. It's not the best time to get married on a Saturday. I've always been passionate about chaplaincy. I just feel that's a real different kind of ministry that for me is in harmony and is attuned to the Jesus model. Because the Jesus model for me is to go and make disciples, go. It's not the come to me and what. It's always going to those communities. And when I see Paul at work in Athens, when I see Jesus out and about, he was always, I described it as ministry interruption. He'd be going in one direction, then end up in another direction. You read the story of Jairus' daughter, for example, there he is going to Jairus' daughter. He gets disturbed by the woman who's been bleeding, hemorrhaging for a number of years, gets distracted by that, deals with all that, and then he's off again.
Yeah.
And I love that as a model of chaplaincy because I think that's what it's about. So I was passionate about chaplaincy and had helped set up a town centre chaplaincy in Bolton. Got involved in a chaplaincy for a local radio station that was growing in Bolton that became a commercial station. And I did the Thought for the Days on that on a regular basis. So I was embedded in that model. I really believed in it. And when the Commonwealth Games came to Manchester, I was involved in coordinating chaplaincy for the Commonwealth Games. And as a consequence of that, I think that's when I became on the radar at Bolton Wanderers, where Sam Allardyce, who, some people see him as a blunt instrument. He ain't a blunt instrument. He knows his stuff. And he understood before most people did, he was ahead of the curve, how it was important that a player looked after at every level, including sports science, your physio, your diet, your tactics, their faith, their emotional, well-being as well. He said, I believe in body, soul, and spirit, and I think that that's important. Anyway, I was invited to attend this interview. There was Phil Gartside, who was the chairman at the time, sadly died, and I've conducted his funeral. There was Sam Allardyce, there was the chief exec, Alan Duckworth, and there was head of HR, Margaret O'Brien. So it was quite a formidable interview panel, but I wasn't bothered because I didn't want the job, so it was fine. It's really nice of you to ask me. Lovely, I get all that. And thank you, but you've got some great candidates out there, some great guys who will do a great job for you. God bless you. Thinking that at the end of it. So Sam said, whoa. You're here, you might as well, explain a bit more. I said, well, I've never been to a football game in my life, don't know the game. So I'm definitely the wrong person. So he said, well, what do you believe? What's important to you? I said, well, I believe chaplaincy is about getting alongside people, helping them to be the best they can be. And he said, well, I really like that. He said, that's what I want to do with players. He said, I like to get alongside players. He said, I deal in damaged goods. I said, well, we don't talk about damaged goods really. He said, but I try and bring them back into having a playing career. People are at the end of the career, or people who've had a difficult time in their playing career. And I said, well, we call that salvation, Sam, you see, in our world. So anyway, chat, had the rest of the interview, left it. 2 days later, I get a phone call. We'd love to give you a trial for 3 months. I'm like, whoa, no. This is not how it should have gone. I get to the stadium, rings my wife and says, you know what, love, I don't know if I can walk through this door because I don't even know what I'm doing here. And she said, well, just look at that place as your cathedral now and go through those doors. And that was a very emotional moment. I went in, I felt like a bit of a lost soul. I felt like a bit of a lemon for quite a long time. It took ages to build up trust. And in fact, when I talk to chaplains about being chaplains now, first thing I do is give them a lemon and walk out the room for 10 minutes and then come back in and say, that's how you'll feel for a little while until you get, you'll feel that really awkward. But, it kind of grew from there and it grew and grew, and it's been a tremendous opportunity, tremendous ministry. And if there was ever a moment when Jesus told me to get out the boat, that was it.
Yeah.
I was very comfortable in that boat, but going into that deep depths of the sports world felt very uncomfortable.
That's really interesting to hear. One of the major things that Bolton, I think, is known for in the past number of years is in 2012, I think it was, there was a well-known kind of incident that happened where one of your midfielders, Fabrice Mwamba, had a cardiac arrest on the field in an FA Cup game between Bolton and Tottenham. And I believe his heart stopped for 78 minutes. In 2012, I was 15 years old. So I was relatively young. From my memory back then, the one thing that I can remember seeing as a young Christian kind of in those times was that a lot of things that were coming out about it on the news and things like that was all about prayer and faith and the importance of praying and faith within his recovery. So what was that like for you as a chaplain? What was going on behind the scenes maybe? And like, how did faith kind of play a part in that whole thing?
It was absolutely massive. Fab was a member of my prayer group, so we prayed all the time together. And so that day I hadn't gone to White Hart Lane, because usually when there's an away game, although it's not the case anymore, but back then we often played a academy game or a reserve game. So I would go and see them on those days, and I'd done that day. And then I'd come home and I was listening to the game in my conservatory on the radio. And of course the commentary changed, and then there was this anxiety over the fact that somebody had collapsed, and then it was highlighted that it was Fabrice. So I was really anxious about that at that point. And, you could tell by the commentary, by the whole thing that something had drastically gone wrong. My phone at that point blew up. I had so many phone calls from different people involved in the club, including the chairman, Phil Gartside, who said, Phil, I don't know where you are, but you need to get yourself down to London right now. So I did that. I got on the train. By the time that I got down there, he'd been transferred to the hospital, and I went straight in to see him. And his fiancée, Shauna, was by his bed. He was in a coma. He had every wire you could ever imagine placed upon him. And there was real anxiety about, his future. So I said to Shauna, I'm going to read his favourite psalm. I knew it was Psalm 121 because we talked about it very often. I lift my eyes to the hills. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Maker, and so on and so forth. And then we prayed. And then that night we were asked by the medical team to think about how we're going to approach the world's media that were already on the doorstep outside tomorrow morning, particularly if, and the chances were great, that Fab dies. So we talked about to the media how we're praying for him and I've been in for prayer, and that's why all those headlines came up, pray for Fab and so on. And Shauna, was a Christian girl, so she had no qualms about any of that. And that night we stayed up and started putting together his obituary because we had to be ready for the morning. And then the following day we went in and we were told they're going to warm his body up, and if there was any slight movement of his finger or his hand or his foot, then that shows the brain activity, but think the worst. So they started warming him up, and he just came round. It was unbelievable. And I was in there with Shauna, and he turned to Shauna. He started trying to pull all the bits and pieces off him as well. And he turned to Shauna and he said, where am I? What's going on? And she said, you're in the hospital, Pap. Something terrible's happened. You've collapsed. The whole world's praying for you. And she said, the chaplain's here as well. So he turned to me, and this showed how much brain activity there was. He turned to me and said, "Hiya, Phil, what are you doing here?" And I said, "Fab, we're here for you. This is unbelievable." And he said, "What was the score?" And I said, "The game stopped because of you." Why didn't they carry on? I said, "You don't realize how big this is, Anyway, medical staff came in. They calmed him down. They were worried about what was going on. They couldn't make it out. They couldn't understand it. And believe it or not, we agreed from that moment, but with the medical staff, with our staff, with the whole media team, that we would have to play this 48 hours behind everything else, because the medical team said, well, he's made a recovery at the moment, but we don't understand how that's happened. And if he has a relapse and then loses his life, what's he going to look like? If you've told the story, oh, he's great, and then something happens. So believe it or not, and it's all in Fab's book, I'm Still Standing, we played the whole story behind 48 hours. But obviously the wonderful thing is he made an incredible recovery. And Fab and I went round to lots and lots of places for the rest of that year, telling the story, sharing the story, and also putting defibrillators into public places as well. We went to various cathedral gatherings to share the story as well. And then in October of that year, I had the privilege of conducting Shauna and Fabrice's wedding, which is wonderful because that's not what I thought I'd be doing. As part of that wedding service, I simply said, just as your heart was getting weaker, the heart of love from the nation got stronger and the beat of prayer got stronger. And here you are today getting married, the one you love. And that was all covered by Hello Magazine, the first and the last time I'll ever be in Hello Magazine.
That's an incredible story. Thank you so much for sharing that. And just before we wrap up, I just really want to commend you, because I think you are doing what Christian fans of football are hoping for, whether it's the club that support or just in football in general. I think that you're such a incredible example of what it looks like for a Christian to be in a place of work, and obviously your job is like specifically included in that. But I just really want to thank you on behalf of Christians, and just that you're doing an incredible job representing the faith and just the way that you conduct yourself. Even from our short discussion, it's really incredible to hear some of the things that you're doing. So as we always finish the podcast off in the same way, we always like to leave our guests on a high note. So first question for you is, what is exciting you about what God is doing? And it can be through Bolton, or it can be through Bolton and community as well. What is exciting you about where things are at the moment?
I do believe passionately that people are searching. And I think it's wonderful that, God's blessed me with an opportunity to be able to answer people's questions in the context of a football club. And, sometimes when the church, perhaps for some people, feels very disconnected, then God's at work everywhere, isn't he? He's not confined to four walls by any stretch of the imagination. So what God is doing out in community, I think, is tremendous. And I'm very excited about it.
Brilliant. So next is, what can we as football fans, as people hearing this, what can we be praying about on your behalf or Bolton's behalf?
Yeah, I think pray for chaplaincy in general across sport. It's a growing thing. Sports Chaplaincy UK is absolutely wonderful organisation that I'm privileged to be a part of, and I'm only a small part of it. And it's wonderful to see how so many sports, including football, see the understanding, the need for chaplaincy at work. And I think that's true not just in sport; it's across lots of organisations. So let's pray for people to think about their own ministry, perhaps becoming a chaplain. It could even be in their own gym, their own local football club. And let's be honest, a chaplain is just being a Christian witness in a place and getting alongside people and supporting them and encouraging. I always say it's about being pastorally proactive and spiritually reactive. It's about, being proactive pastorally and doing that good for somebody. And then people ask those questions, and then you can be reactive to that as well. So let's pray for that, because wouldn't that be wonderful? There's 30 million people involved in sport over a week. A lot of that happens on a Sunday. So the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few.
Yeah.
I think that's a good place to wrap this up. And so thank you very much for kind of joining us. And it's really encouraging to kind of hear the work that kind of you're doing and some of the kind of impacts that you've had specifically, but as well as that, the impact the actual club is having as well on the community and sharing the love of Jesus Christ with those kind of around you. That is amazing to hear. And I'll probably speak for Warner as well and say that I'm very encouraged by hearing that your Christian influence and the Christian roots of Bolton, not just something of the past, but something that is kind of active and alive today, which is fantastic. So yeah, thank you very much for joining us, Phil. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on this show. And for those listening, if you want any more biblical-based podcasts and programs and any more content like that, you can simply just head over to our website, gnba.net. That's gnba.net. And thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next one.